Hey, sports parents. If we haven't met, my name is Jonathan Carone, and I'm the host of the show. Today, we're joined by Jason Sachs, CEO of Positive Coaching Alliance. Jason's been with PCA since 2006, serving in a variety of roles, including president, chief development officer, EVP of business development philanthropy, and a whole lot more, all the way down to the local chapter level where he first got started. You'll hear more about this in the conversation today, but as president of PCA, Jason created partnership with major media outlets like ESPN, leading brands like Steph Curry's Curry brand, Gatorade, the NWSL, MLB, NBA, Little League, and U.S. Soccer, just to name a few. Prior to PCA, Jason worked at IMG in TV production, and he also worked for the New York Knicks, as well as coached high school basketball. In our conversation, we talk about the importance of youth sports and the impacts they have on kids. We touch on the inequalities in our current youth sports models and environments, and how many kids don't even have access to local leagues. We also talk about what makes a great youth coach, how parents can make sure their goals align with their kids' goals, and what success actually looks like in youth sports. Before we get to that conversation, just like we do every week, we're going to ask that if you like this show today, go ahead and rate us, review us wherever you're listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, writing up a small review would be a huge help. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Most of all, if this episode helps you in any way, the best thing you can do is share it with a friend. With all that out of the way, here's my conversation with Jason Sachs. We're here with Jason from Positive Coaching Alliance. Jason, thanks so much for being here with us.
I appreciate you having me, Jonathan. Looking forward to it.
We were talking a little bit beforehand, so I kind of know where this answer is going to go. But my favorite question to ask each and every week before we get started is to meet the parent before we meet the expert. So can you tell us a little bit about your kids, what they play, and what it's like being dad to them?
Yeah, I love that question. So my wife and I, we have 9-year-old boy-girl twins. And so we are, I wouldn't say we're in the thick of it yet, because I think we've been pretty balanced on how we've approached this youth sports thing. But it's been a lot of fun because our kids are getting more and more into sports right now. And, you know, someone who's been at PCA for 19 years, who grew up playing so many sports, has coached at high school, college level. It's fun to see them enjoying it, having fun, learning about it, following, you know, pro sports and college sports, and waking up and then, you know, checking the box score and things like that. But right now we're wrapping up soccer and softball, and, you know, they've been playing flag football, you know, they play basketball. We're trying everything, right? We just put up a volleyball net in our backyard because why not? You know, let's get a lot of wiffle ball tournaments happening in our neighborhood. So we're trying to keep it light and fun and try as much as possible. You know, my daughter loves flag football, so there's that's been fun to see the growth of flag football.
That's been huge.
Both, you know, yeah, both my son and daughter are playing that, and now we're starting. It's been co-ed, but this year our local league is starting an all-girls league, which is great. Our high school has a girls flag team now, the state sanctioned in the state of Illinois. So it's just really cool to see them, you know, their eyes opening to trying something new, you know, like being in a place where, if it's the right environment, like learning how to fail and doing that safely. And what I love about it is there have been so many instances with both my son and daughter after a game getting back home and then either going out in the driveway and shooting hoops, or going in the backyard, kicking the soccer ball around, throwing the football around, whatever it might be. So seeing that, you know, we talk about PCA a lot, like that romantic stage with sports, and how do we extend that for as long as possible. So that's our goal. You know, let them bounce the ball around the house for as much as they want, you know, like to some degree, but trying to just keep it fun and keep it light, because we know that it can get out of hand pretty quickly.
If you would have told me when I was in high school that 20 years after I graduated, flag football for girls would be a high
Yeah.
school state sanctioned sport in, like, what's it, up to a third of the country at this point or more? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't even a thing. Like, the only time girls played flag football when I was in high school was the powder puff game before
Powder puffs,
homecoming.
right? Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
it's like an entire movement that's like, you may know better than I do, but I would guess my daughter is she's in 5th grade right now when this episode comes out.
Yep.
I would guess by the time she gets to high school in 5 years, it's going to be the majority of the states in the country that have passed it and are sanctioning it.
I think that's 100% right. I also think like there are Division III colleges that have girls flag football as sports. Like there's whole conferences that are having that. That's you seeing Division I putting it in like as a like club sports that potentially on the path to become a sanctioned sport. So I mean, I even think boys flag football will be a high school sport sooner than later. It's in the Olympics in 28. We'll see what happens after that. And if it gets to 32 as well, and you have those back-to-back Olympics, then this thing's going to continue to grow, which is exciting, right? Like
It's a whole different sport. It's like
giving
banana ball and baseball.
right,
You can't compare
exactly.
the two sports. They're based around the same thing, but they're totally different.
And I think the big thing with that is that's okay. And I think youth football providers need to recognize that it's not just a feeder into tackle. Like people might just play flag forever. And I think that's totally fine. And we need to be okay with
And
that. Right.
I'll be the
So,
first to admit I don't want my son playing tackle football. I worked for a
no,
Division
yeah,
I
we
football
will
team.
not. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've been around
Yeah.
it. I've seen it too up close for my comfort level, knowing
Yep.
what we know about head injuries. And I know it's safer now than it was when I
Exactly.
was growing up, all those things. But if he had the opportunity to play flag, that's a
Yeah.
different like I'd be much more
For
open
sure.
to that than I am tackle football.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
For
that
sure.
dad.
I think
I'll
that's
own
the
it.
mindset. No, same here. Like it's a great opportunity. So I'm excited that there's going to be more and more opportunities because I think there's so much research, not just on flag football, but so many other sports that kids want to try a lot of new things. So the more opportunities we're providing for them to try those things out, keep them active, that's a good thing.
I totally agree. On that front,
Yeah.
PCA recently partnered with ESPN, the Curry, Steph and Aisha, and a few other people in a campaign called Take Back Sports. And it's this year-long initiative to get more kids playing sports, having fun, all the things we're just talking about. Before we get into like the heart stuff and the emotions and the tips and all that, tell us what that campaign is and what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, it's kudos to ESPN for really stepping up one of the biggest sports brands, that is out there, and the fact that they have made this investment financially with their media resources, really to focus on the whole campaign of Take Back Sports. And that idea is, as we're talking about, youth sports can get out of control. Like, let's take it back to what it should be. And the real focus is, four areas that they want to focus on is community rec leagues. Like, that's not a bad thing. Kids playing locally rec community oriented leagues is a good thing. Quality coach training. That's, one of the bread and butter things that PCA does, training coaches across the country. We know that the coach can often make or break an experience for a child. So let's make sure that we are investing in coaches in that experience because that's what's going to keep kids coming back each year. How do we make sure kids aren't specializing and they're playing multi-sports? And then the last one is how do we just continue to promote fun in sports, right? There's so much out there around, whether it's specialization or the win at all cost culture or this rush to be at an elite level or travel, whatever it might be. But how do we keep that promotion around fun? Because that's what sports should be. And also, what role do parents play in that? So, obviously we're partnered with ESPN on the coach training front, but what we launched recently was this whole parent campaign and how are we providing resources for parents on what their role is, what are tangible things they can be doing before the game, at the game, after the game to ensure that their kids are having a positive sports experience. And obviously having Stephen and Aisha Curry involved, you can't go wrong with the work that they do. We're fortunate enough to work with Curry brand and Under Armour
He's a
that
bucket
underwrite
list
a lot of the
guest on here. If I could ever
exactly.
get him on
Yeah.
this show, that'll be a win.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing, and one of the cool parts about that is he is now a sports parent
Mhm.
himself, and, there was a clip that went viral last year leading up to the Olympics where he was talking to another guy on the basketball team, and he said, "We've been traveling around the last couple of months going to my daughter's volleyball, like, AAU tournaments. It felt like I was playing AAU again, being back out on the road." And now so him getting to see that through the eyes of him being a parent and obviously his parents being so into, high level athletes and getting that experience. So it's great. The fact that we have the media power behind ESPN. Our goal for this was, how do we bring new people into our universe and into, what you're doing, and the fact that, we were talking, you hadn't heard of PCA. It's like, great. How do we get more people? The work you're doing is amazing because it's bringing more people, raising that awareness on what it means to be a positive youth sports parent.
I have to tell this story just because it has nothing to do with the campaign. But so I was a senior at Liberty when Seth Curry, Steph's younger brother, was coming
Okay.
through.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I started and ran a club called the Lunatics. We ran our student section. And so we would
Love it.
travel to away games as well. And over Christmas break, we played Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. They had just moved up to Division I. Their gym was smaller than my high school gym. And me and some friends went to that game, and I literally sat next to Sonia Curry for the entire game. And so getting to watch Sonia be a sports mom for Seth, like, and this was Steph's junior year at Davidson. So he was still like, he
Yeah.
hadn't left for the draft yet. Like,
Right.
the question was always, which Curry parent is going to be at which game,
Be at the
because
game,
they
right?
did
Yeah.
not miss those boys playing. And so
Yes.
watching her, if you want to talk about over the top cheering for your kid, like, she wasn't doing anything. Like, she was just so encouraging of Seth the entire time.
Yeah.
It was so much fun to sit and watch her because obviously she'd seen the highest levels with Dell
Yeah.
and everything. And
Yep.
Steph had made that run the year before, but just to
Right.
watch
Yep.
her be a sports mom, like we, we went to VMI that year and it was a giant game, sold out arena. Seth went off for like 40 points. And every time he made a 3-pointer, we would chant, "Thank you, Sonia." And like, it was just one of those things, like, we're in an opposing
Yeah.
school's gym. Sonia's sitting behind
That-
the bench. It's just like that is a core memory for me. So anytime somebody talks about the Currys, I always talk about that
Yeah.
because like, when you get it, you get it. And you can see
Yeah.
the kids who come from parents who got it. And
Yeah.
like, for all the things the Currys are, you can tell they had supportive parents who understood and supported them in the right ways as they were growing up.
No, it's true, and I think it just shows on how what everything that Stefan does in the community. We work with his foundation, Eat, Learn, Play, as well in Oakland, and making sure that kids have access to sports there. And so, yeah, off the court, is his work is as amazing as what he can do on the court as well.
One of the things you said, and I think we're in agreement here, but I just want to get it in your words, like the
Yeah.
importance of kids playing youth sports. In your mind, as the leader of an organization the size of PCA, like, foundationally, why do you believe youth sports are so important to the development of kids, not as athletes, but as human beings?
At the core, youth sports can change lives, right? Like, that is full stop. That's it. As you start to drill down, that only happens if you're deliberate with how it's done. We talk a lot about sports done right. Unfortunately, sports isn't really done right in our country on a lot of levels. And, you probably people hear the phrase, sports develop character, right? And that is true, but that doesn't happen on its own. You need to really be deliberate, whether you're a coach, a parent, an organizational leader. That has to be a focus, because left to its own devices, sports can actually be a breeding ground for a lot of bad things, negative environments, different types of abuse. So we can't just roll the ball out and say, "Oh, it's a basketball, it's a court, it's a field, whatever it might be. Great life skills and character development is happening," right? That's not how this works. We need to be deliberate. And so, outside of schools, youth sports in our country is the largest institution where kids gather. So you think about it, this is really a virtual classroom for kids, right? There's so much that they can that they can get out of the experience that is going to stay with them long after their playing days are over. So that's why PCA is all about equipping the adults and student athletes with the tools to make sure that they have that positive youth sports experience. And it's also working in communities to make sure that all kids have access to that, because we know that not all kids have access, and we know the benefits of when they get into that experience. So we want to break down those barriers, whether it's the experiential barriers of a positive youth experience, or the actual access barriers to that experience as well. So we know that when kids get in an environment where they feel safe, seen, heard, and valued, that's where the magic happens. But we need to work to make sure that that's what we're providing to them.
One of the things you said right there was the access to youth sports. And
Yep.
like the video that blew this entire platform up was when I talked about the death of rec league and how the death
Yeah.
of rec league around this country is going to be one of the worst things we do for our kids, both socially and athletically as well. And some of the comments on that was that rec league's not going anywhere. Like rec league hasn't gotten too expensive. Like if you can't afford $100, then what's going on? Blah, like all these things. They don't realize that it's not just the registration fee. It's also the gear. Every kid in T-ball has to have their own helmet and their own bat now. And every
Right.
kid, like what, all those things. That inequity is, I know from even reading about you before we started talking, is one of the things that is in your heart that you want to help. Can
Yeah.
you, I got a couple questions on that front.
Yeah. Yeah.
To set the foundation, how big of a problem is the inequality in youth sports, and why is it an issue in your mind?
Yeah, it's a huge inequality. The playing field's not level, right? Youth ages 6 through 18 from low income homes quit sports because of financial costs at 6 times the rate of kids from their more affluent peers, right? Um, Kids in low income neighborhoods participate at half the rate of their more affluent peers. They start later, they drop out earlier. So we know that it's just not as easy for them, right? If we know that youth sports can be this unbelievable opportunity and not everybody can get to it, we need to figure out how to remove those barriers so more kids can get to it, right? And I think that starts with like the youngest age, the pipeline, right? And we can get to the whole elite pay to play model, because I think that's where everybody starts to go. But I'm talking about, the local communities where kids either they don't feel safe of where they're going, or their parents aren't around because they're working, and so they're lacking a caregiver or a parent to be able to get them somewhere. There are many factors that show the inequities of access to sports. So that's one of the things that we're working to do in local communities, is figuring out what are the issues here, how can we combat those issues, and how can we bring tangible tools and resources to make that happen, right? And a quick story, we talked about Oakland earlier, but in Oakland, one of our, coalitions, the work we were doing is, why is a child in Oakland, why is their youth sports experience different than other communities? And one of the things we saw is that kids couldn't play sports at no cost until they got to middle school. And so you think about it, middle school, like that is such a crazy time for kids, right? They're not just going to show up and try something new, right? Like, they're not just going to be like, oh, sure, I'll go out for the basketball team. I'll try
I'll go
something
set
new.
myself up to get embarrassed in front of my friends at the time when I'm the most insecure of my entire life. Let's go do that.
Yeah, let's do that, right? So what we saw was we got the right people around the table, helped facilitate conversations, worked alongside community partners, and the amazing work of Oakland Unified School District. They started an elementary sports league. So now that created like 3,000 more new youth sports opportunities for kids in Oakland. So now they're sports sampling, they're trying a lot of different sports at a young age. So we're starting that pipeline a lot earlier. And then they're getting to play the sport. They're learning more. They're connecting. One of my favorite things that came out of some of the research we did, parents said that they felt more connected to their community because of this youth sports league, right? And I think that's what's changing here in our country. You think about where communities gather. Right now they gather at the sports fields, right? Weeknights they're at the sports fields. On the weekends, that's where they are. That's where people are gathering, like, so we need to recognize that this is a community building experience. And, I think right now, of everything that we're dealing with in our country, youth sports could be one of the last things that potentially brings people together from different communities. So we need to make sure that we are keeping it or ensuring that it is a experience where everyone feels welcome and it's inclusive and it's accessible to everyone. So that's why we want to work with community partners, whether that's, removing barriers, helping set up leagues. A league can't exist if there aren't coaches. So can we recruit coaches and train them to provide that youth sports experience? But we just need to make sure that the kids have access to it, and it's close to them and it's accessible to them, and they see people that look like them when they're participating. So there's a lot of different things that go into that, but it really does take the entire community to step in.
I have a different experience because of where I live. It's interesting because when we think inequalities of sports, we immediately, our minds for most of us go to inner cities or Oakland or something like that.
Yeah.
I live in a poor rural county in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so our soccer league, our rec soccer league, I live in the largest town of the towns in the county. And so we have in the U10 division 3 or 4 co-ed teams each season.
Mm.
Like we don't
Mhm.
have enough for just girls and just boys. We have 3 or 4 co-ed
Yeah.
teams. The other 2 towns in our league, we had to combine the 3 leagues into one club
One.
because the other towns, they only had 1, maybe 2 teams in each division. So like
Yeah.
the little league in one of the towns just
Yeah.
folded this past spring because they didn't have enough kids and coaches to
Enough
play.
kids.
They could have maybe have done 1 team, but they would have had to travel around. And it's just what I think a lot of people don't realize is the population densities in our country. In North Carolina, the 6 largest counties have over 50% of the population.
Yeah.
And so we're not that much different from a lot of other states where it's like
Right. Yeah. No.
so much of it is around your city centers. And if you don't
Major
live
metropolitan
in
areas.
those
Yeah.
areas, like sometimes travel ball is your only option because like you don't have teams to
Right.
play in
There's
a rec
nothing
league.
else.
And like
Right.
so unfortunately you get into these like little local travel leagues and then a couple parents start taking it too seriously and it's like, oh well, can we
Yeah.
go an hour further? Can we? And so
Right.
like when
Right.
we talk inequalities in youth sports, it's not just inner city. It is rural areas just as much, if not more. It's not a competition, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it is a huge issue for so many places that anytime I talk about not specializing, I get the
Hmm.
comments from the big high schools. Oh, well, if you don't start
Right.
specializing so young, then you don't have a chance at the high school. People don't realize the average high school in America is 1,500 kids, which
Yeah.
means statistically half the high schools are smaller than that.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not all major affluent suburbs. There's a
Yep.
lot of 300 kid elementary schools out there where
Yeah.
doing this is really hard.
Yeah. I mean, even in our local little league, at different age groups, right? Like our softball division is 3 grades, and
Which
and
is
we
not
and we
ideal.
have right, right, because that's a big
Yeah.
gap, right? Of experience and size and talent, all those things. So I think, and so then I start thinking about, well, why is that, right? And I'm from the East Coast and I'm like, well, nobody's really playing lacrosse out here. So like, it's not like they're playing lacrosse. So what is it? And then I go back to thinking about, well, how are we teaching the game, right? Softball and baseball at a young age is really slow and it's really, like it can be boring and it's really hard, like to teach these things. So what is it that kids either aren't like, they're not sticking with the sport? Are there things that we can do to make it a more enjoyable experience at those younger age while still teaching the game? And so I think part of that is also, as adults in leagues, we need to make sure that we're not rushing to get to, all right, we need to make sure we're playing X amount of games. Like that doesn't matter, right? What matters is, are they learning the game? Are they having fun? And do they want to come back next year and keep playing?
Yeah. I'm going to keep talking more about that, but we're going to take a quick break to share some resources with everyone. When you hear the promo for the weekend playbook in just a minute, but don't fast forward through this, I want you to know that when you sign up for that, you get PCA's top 4 parenting resources sent right to you just for signing up. So I'll give you more details about that in a second, and then we'll be back with Jason on the other side of that.
Have you ever showed up at the wrong field at the right time? Hey, my name's Zoe, and I've got 3 athletes and club and travel teams, and that's happened to me one too many times. So 2 years ago, I created a new app called Orgo, exclusively for sports parents. It imports schedules from all the different team apps, as well as your personal calendar to keep the entire family, including your kids, on the same page. Go to orgohq.com, download directly from the App Store or Google Play, and make Orgo part of your winning routine. Get the right people to the right places on time.
Hey, it's Jonathan. If you haven't signed up for the weekend playbook yet, this is your reminder to do that. It is a short, no-fluff email that lands every Friday with practical tips you can actually use before, during, and after your kid's game. And when you sign up, we'll also send you 4 of the top resources from Positive Coaching Alliance. They're one of the leading organizations in this country equipping parents and coaches in youth sports. The link's down in the show notes, so go check that out. One of the things you have said in our conversation is the importance of coaches. And I know that's what you all do. And this wasn't in our notes, but I'm going to throw it at you because I think it goes with what we're talking about. I believe the best youth coaches are the people listening to this show, because the people listening to this show are the ones who care about the overall experience of the kid. And maybe they don't know the ins and outs of their sports the way that others would, but for the parent listening who has a heart for the kids having a good experience, but doesn't have the confidence, how would you talk to that parent and encourage them to give it a shot?
I love that question because I think that you hit on something that is very true, especially at the younger levels and kids getting involved in youth sports. We need more coaches out there, right? We've all seen emails. We've all been on the emails saying, we can't
I've sent those emails.
select a roster. We can't select the rosters because we still need 2 or 3 coaches. Will you sign up? And then you're like, well, I don't want to sign up to be an assistant coach because if I'm sign up to the assistant coach, that means that I automatically get promoted to the head coach, right? So I think there's a couple things that coaches should think about. One is hopefully the league that where you're playing is going to provide you some resources. And we partner with 1,500 schools and youth sports organizations across the country where they will host a PCA coach workshop to give coaches the tools and resources so that they feel more empowered to be able to show up at the field and run a practice and, and feel like they know how to do that even if they haven't coached before. The skills and drills aspect of it, I think, goes right alongside of that. Some of our local little leagues, they do a great job. They do a clinic or 2 and saying, here's how to run a practice. Here are some of the basic things. I think leagues that provide almost like a roving coach that can go and come to a practice and show you a couple drills just to get you started. But I think at the youngest levels, especially in like local little leagues, the most important thing is what experience and what environment are you providing for your kids? And so I think equipping them in this safe environment when they show up and, a smile and asking them how their day is going, checking in with them, like those are the types of things that what we need coaches to do. Because even if the coach knows everything about the sport, if they don't have the PCA side of it, then it doesn't matter because the kid's not showing up, right? So we need to create this environment because what's going to bring them back is the experience, right? We, in our workshops or when I'm out speaking, I love to ask people, I'll do it with you, like who was one of the most impactful coaches that you've had, right? Immediately somebody pops into your mind. And then when we ask, why is that? The list of answers we get is they supported me. They were like a father or mother figure to me. They were my biggest fan. They taught me how to bounce back from mistakes. They taught me about dealing with adversity, all those things. And it's like, all right, now in the group, raise your hand if the reason you remember that coach is because of the wins and losses, right? Like nobody raises their hand. And that always becomes, I know there are a lot of things that leagues need to focus on and what they need to spend money on, but we need to invest in the experience. And oftentimes the experience comes down to the coach and also the parents and what the parents are doing. But leagues need to invest in coach training and creating positive environments for kids to play, because that is what's going to stick with them 20, 30 years down the road. And it's what's going to keep them coming back each year. So if I'm a organizational leader, like, that's a good business investment, right? If I have a good experience, kids are going to come back the
Right.
next year, and we have more people playing.
Switching gears a little bit to the parent side, because that's what we talk about most around here. We talk
Yeah.
about the mindset, and I think everything we've talked about so far has been great. But for the parent who's listening to this, you've been in youth sports for over 2 decades at this point. When you see a parent acting out on the sideline, let me back up. I think so much of that happens because we don't realize what's going on inside of us. And so that
Mhm.
makes us do
Totally.
things that we probably wouldn't do in our right mind. So what do you see as what's going on underneath that the parent hasn't yet noticed, that's causing those things, so that we can be more aware of that as we're cheering on our kids?
Yeah. I mean, there are probably a lot of other people you could bring on with degrees, with doctor degrees, that could talk about this too. But what I would say is, I think the first most basic thing is, like, we don't know when people are showing up what they just dealt with, right? Like, so we don't know how they're showing up, and that goes for kids when they show up to practice. So I think everybody needs to keep that in mind. So that's sort of like the baseline. But bigger picture, uh, when you think about it, I think there's a couple different things, right? I think parents care so much about their kids and their kids being successful that they will do anything possible to do that. And sometimes that energy is misdirected or misguided, right? So what they might think is actually helping is actually hurting, right? Or deterring the child, right? Like, I've coached youth baseball, youth basketball, youth soccer for my kids, and I see parents on the sideline that are so engaged on the sideline, so fired up, and I look at the child when the parent is yelling, and the child is shaking their head. They're like, Dad, what are you doing? Like that. That's taking them out of their game. Like, it is not helping. It is hurting. So the lack of awareness there from a parent thinking that they are actually doing something to help is actually, hurting that experience. So I think parents, it's figuring out where to direct their energy when they're on the sideline is an important thing. I also think, because of what we've touched on a little bit here, is this pay to play model, starting earlier, investing in travel teams and all those types of experiences.
If you're wearing a mortgage on your back, if I'm paying a mortgage every month, I'm more invested than
Right. You're putting in a lot of money, and you're saying, I've paid $2,500 for this travel soccer club. We're traveling every weekend, like gas on the road, hotel, whatever. Like, this is a big investment. I want to see what I'm getting in return. So I need to, like, lean in a little bit more. And I think people start to get off kilter a little bit there when they think about it from that sense of, well, what is this going to lead to? Right. And so, the other crazy thing that's happened, is, and it's crazy when you step back and think about it, is what your child is doing on the field. You as a parent, it almost like has the status in the community, right? To be able to say that my child's playing on this travel team, or that they did this, or, how many times your son or daughter, like, has a great game, and you're walking out of the gym and people are congratulating you, and you're like, that's right. Like, that's
when
my
you had
child, right?
nothing to do with
Well,
it.
right, right, right.
Absolutely
Right.
nothing to do with
So
that.
yeah, yeah. And so I think there's we've tied status in the community to success in youth sports, which is bizarre. And so I think I would just urge parents to, like, take a step back and pause and reflect on, like, what are we trying to get out of this? And also, like, in real time, everybody needs a self-control routine, right? Like, when I started at PCA back in 2006, I was also a high school basketball coach, and I saw myself on camera, how I was reacting to what, like, I was, something would happen on the court, and I would either have my hands in my face or I would turn my back. And when I saw that, I'm like, what signal is that showing to the kids, because they're going to look over at me when something goes wrong, right? So A, we need to fix that, but B, when they do look over at me, what am I giving back to them, right? So that's not saying I need to be perfect and like not get mad but what is my self-control routine to show that? And whether that's like counting backwards in your head or taking a walk, like sometimes I would just like walk down the sideline and you just sort of like get that in your parents on the sideline need that, right? What is their self-control routine when something goes wrong or they get fired up about a call? Like what are they doing to not add fuel to the fire? Or because oftentimes when they start yelling, the kids feel embarrassed and then that takes them off their game. Like I haven't seen many kids when their parents like berating an
It
official
makes them
or
better.
yelling at the coach. They're like, yeah, that's right. You tell them, they're like, oh no, so.
You said that parents will do whatever they can to help their kids be successful. And you and I both know that most kids aren't going pro. They're not getting recruited, and most of them won't even play on the varsity team in high school. So, what does success look like for the average kid? And I think another way to ask that would be like, what should parents be aiming for instead of their kid being quote unquote elite?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it leads to one of my favorite tools and resources that PCA has. We call it the 100-point exercise. And it's basically,
You get that with the weekend playbook.
there you go. It's a nice little plug. It's basically a list of things as a parent. What are your goals for your child in youth sports, right? Making friends, learning the sport, learning life skills, making the varsity team, getting a college scholarship, winning. And I want to be clear here, right? Like PCA is not about everybody gets a trophy or anti-competition. We want to win. We strive to compete at the highest level. We just know that you have to do it the right way. And sports is this unique thing because of the competition that adds something to it. So that's what makes it magical, but it needs to be done the right way. So this 100-point exercise, we ask parents to fill out, like, what are your goals and divvy up 100 points on all these different things. And then we challenge them to do two things. One is look at where you're putting the most points. When you're on the sideline, is that what you are cheering for? So if you're saying that you want them to learn life skills or you want them to be a good teammate, when they're a good teammate, are you cheering for that? Or are you only cheering for the results-oriented things that we're used to cheering for, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is get another version of that, give it to your child, see where they put their points, and then put that next to each other and see where you are aligned or misaligned. We've gotten a ton of feedback where people have said this exercise has opened up a whole new world for communication between my child and the parents just because of what they are like. We didn't know that this is what they want. They just wanted to be with their friends and it was a social thing and they didn't want it to be something that turned into something bigger. So I think setting the expectations is one of the most important things you can do because at the end of the day, you need to figure out what's our end goal here, right? We talked about all this investment, the time away from family, the traveling, the amount of vacations now that are tied to tournaments around the country, right? Like all those things are revolving around this experience. So you could play all these games and nothing else is guaranteed. Making the high school team, getting college, like none of that's guaranteed. So if that is the end goal, like you need to be ready to potentially be disappointed. So let's come up with other goals, right? And we talked about a lot of that before around, sports being done right. And that's a virtual classroom and it's teaching life skills for kids. So many people that I talk to now, they talk about, I want people that played sports because I know some of the lessons that they learned and that what type of employee that's going to make them, right? Or being a good teammate, all those types of things. I love this story from a college coach who's been heavily involved with PCA, Chris Collins, the head men's basketball coach at Northwestern, played at Duke. His dad was Doug Collins, coached the Bulls, coached Michael Jordan. Chris tells a story that he, growing up, he was always the best basketball player on his basketball team, right? But his parents always made him play baseball as well, to take a break, right? Play multiple sports. But he says, like, I was the, I don't know, middle of the road baseball player. Like I was the 6th, 7th best player on our team. And he said, so what it taught me was, what does it feel like to be a middle of the road average player? and how am I being treated by the best players, right? And so now when I go back to the basketball team where I'm the best player, I know what it's like to be somebody on the bench that's only getting spot minutes. And how do I want to be treated if I'm that player? So I think this whole idea of, and that's one of the things that I love about rec leagues, right? It's community. You have all different talents. Like, it's a good lesson to learn at a young age, like having empathy for others and learning how to help others and being a good teammate and being a good neighbor, like those types of things. We don't get that if we just sort of like push everything to let's just get an all-star team really quickly. And I mean, you get a little of that, but I think there's just something there's special that you can learn from these things. And so I would challenge parents to set the expectation and get aligned with your child on what the goals, what the outcome has to be, or what you want the outcome to be. Because at the end of the day, you need to realize, like, what is this all for? I was at a local, neighborhood party a couple weeks ago, and somebody was like, they came from a baseball game. They're like, that's the 60th game we've played in the last like 3 months. And he just said, like, I don't know what we're like, what we're striving for here, right? And it's almost like part of it's become, you want to be able to say that.
Right.
I don't know why we want to say that, right? Like that doesn't mean anything, right? So
it's like bragging about how busy you are as a worker. It's like, congratulations that you haven't figured out how to be productive and have work-life balance. And like, but congratulations on that. It's not a badge of honor.
Yeah. And I want to be I want to be clear that there are a lot of talented kids that have the drive and want to be doing things, and they deserve to be doing all that, right? And that's great. Like there is
but on that
opportunity
front,
for them.
If regular listeners of the show know this, but I'm the PA announcer for my local high school's baseball team. And so this summer we hosted a youth camp for the kids in town, and the rising third through fifth graders were there. And I knew half the fifth graders because my daughter's in the same grade. So it's just, I've been around those kids, and I know the kids who play travel. I know the kids that are really good. And I was so dang proud to watch that group of kids bring along the little league kid, the kid who just played for the first time this year. Like these kids are doing ground balls and pop flies, and they're more aware of drop steps and things like that I didn't learn until high school. But they're not treating the first year little league kid as if he's less than because he didn't know. They're bringing him along. Or like when they played a sandlot game out in the outfield, like a kid would go from hitting a home run on this tiny little field we set up to coaching up the rising third grader who can't even hit the ball yet. And like,
love that.
I'm more excited about the kids those kids will become by the time they get to high school than the fact that, hey, in 5 years, we might have another really good, like we got another good class of kids coming through, like that are super talented. But like, I'm more proud that those kids are doing it the right way. And I'm thankful. I know that group of parents is trying to do it the right way, even though, like I said, we're a small town. So to really play, they reluctantly went travel when they did, because it's just, it was the best option for them at the time. And so like,
and again, like I don't think travel is necessarily a bad thing if you have the right mindset of why you're doing it, right? And so it just can't be, if we do this, then we know we're going to make varsity, and then maybe because that's not guaranteed. So you need to be ready. Hey, we're going to put in this investment. We're going to put in the time. And guess what? Like that might not happen down the road. And that's okay. Right. That is totally
but the kids
fine.
Those guys are becoming that. Like I walked away from that. Like I have bragged to so many parents about being there and watching their kids since then, because like it wasn't the athletic accomplishment that was impressive to me. And sure, like some of those kids are really good, but like one of the dads is a college baseball umpire, and he's a couple years ahead of me in school. And it's like, I knew his kid was going to be good because he's a switch hitting fifth grader. Like that's not like he's good. And so but it's like watching him bring along other kids was more impressive than watching him hit from both sides of the plate as a fifth grader.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's
if
great.
That's what we can do through sports, if those are the kids that we can grow our kids into, like that's what's going to last a lot longer than any of these accomplishments.
Exactly. Yeah. You nailed it.
All right. 2 of my favorite questions that I get to ask every single week. And I told you about them beforehand. So hopefully I'm not catching you off guard. What have I not asked that you think parents need to hear the answer to?
I think just reminding parents that burnout is real. And I think the balance of we need to keep kids busy and engaged, and also how much are we signing them up for, right? Um, I think people recognize playing multiple sports is super important, right? But I also think we need to be careful on how many sports they're playing in one season, right? Like there's plenty of people we know that are playing baseball and football and soccer, like all in the same 3 months, right? So I just would say, I know you want to keep your kids active. I just think that we need to be careful, and not burn them out, and know and acknowledge the fact that it does feel like a sprint at a young age to like get them into things. But I think what we just talked about is taking a step back and ensuring that why you're doing this, right? And if you can talk about that, and talk about that with your kids, so they know, right? And they have ownership of why they want to do it. And guess what? Somebody can stop playing a sport for a year. That doesn't mean they retired, right? Like they can always come back, right? They might need a break, and guess what? They can come back. And if that means that they're not going to be the best one, that's okay too. So I think right. Yeah. Like that's the thing. There's so many kids. We're losing so many kids in sports before they even fully develop, and so it's just
I
like
quit playing
we put
soccer
it.
in 5th grade. And
Yeah.
by the time middle school started in 7th grade, I thought I'd been gone too long and couldn't come back. So I never,
Right.
like, I was a better soccer player than I was a baseball player, and I enjoyed soccer more than
Yeah.
baseball, but I thought I'd been gone too long. So by the time soccer
Yeah.
tryouts rolled around in 7th grade, I thought I couldn't do it. And like,
Yeah.
one of the driving things for me is like, I want kids to not be in that position. I want them to know, like,
Right.
you can come back. Like, it might be hard.
You can come
You might
back.
be, you might
Yeah.
be on the end of the bench, and it's going to take work, but you can come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And guess what? If you're in the right environment and you're at the end of the bench, you're going to have a role, and you can figure out what your role is, because guess what? When you go into the work world, whatever you're doing, you might not be in the role that you want at that time, but you can figure out what you have to do to put in the time to improve. Like those are good things to learn, because as we talked about this whole like sports done right, if it's done right, it can be this really safe place to teach kids about failure and adversity, that when they get to, some real life situations, that's important to know.
Yeah, that sports done right. I think that's the phrase. Like, keep coming back. Are we doing it, quote unquote, right? Are we doing it in a healthy way? All right, last question for you. We like to end on an encouragement each week. How would you encourage parents as they walk through this sprint that we feel, to keep things the right way? What would your encouragement be to them?
I would say, like, pause and reflect, because it's easy to get caught up in, we got to keep signing up. If we're not playing travel at this certain age, what's that going to mean? Like, I would say, parents, or as you're thinking about the conversations you're having with your kids, like, verbalize and talk about these things, right? Don't just feel like, oh, it's not up, like we have to. Like, take a step back, align on those goals, figure out what does success look like for this family in youth sports. It might not look the same for our neighbors, and that's okay. But what does it look like for this family? And then if you're all aligned, great, go do what you want, right? But at least you have set that expectation, and remember, what is the end game? Like, what are you striving to do because of the investment that you're making here? And just get aligned on that and be clear about that, and check yourself on it, right? Like, so I would just say, like, make sure you are having these conversations in your family, and be able to revisit them throughout the time. And then the one, that this is the clip that, on our site goes viral and everything like that. Don't talk to your kids right after the game about the game, right? Like, give them that cooling off period. You're fired up, the coach is fired up, your child's fired up, or guess what? Like, they don't want to talk about it. The good time to talk about it is, like, when you ask them if they're ready, if they want to talk about it. And maybe it's the next day. There's a lot better chance that they're going to want to talk about it the next day, that they're going to be ready to receive that information the next day. But let's give them a little break right after that game, and make sure that you're telling them that regardless of what they do on the field, you love them and you'd love to watch them play.
That's so great. Jason, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
That's it for today's episode. As a reminder, if you want to know more about Jason's work with Positive Coaching Alliance, you can head to positivecoach.org. If you want your weekend playbook, including PCA's top 4 parenting resources, head to healthysportsparents.com/playbook. If you like the show today, I'm going to invite you to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it would be a huge help for you to write up a small review. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button as well. If this episode has helped you in any way, or if you found it interesting, the best way you can help us grow the show is sharing this episode with a friend. Most of all, above all of that, enjoy this time with your kids, watching them play the sport they love. Have a great week, everybody.